My father-in-law, was hospitalized. He was once hospitalized just before Sukkot, and he had to stay in the hospital over Sukkot. So the Sat Marov, Rabbi Michel, I was very close to my father-in-law, so he came to visit him. He was in the hospital. So my father-in-law told him how distraught he was about the fact that he's not going to be able to sit in the sukkah on Sukkot. So the Sat Marov said that I remember about which tzaddik it was. They told a story about a certain tzaddik that he had a chassid whose father-in-law was a misnagid. So this chassid had a little boy, and...
He said this about himself?
What?
He said this about himself, that he had a chassid?
No. Sadnu was telling the story to my father-in-law. Right. So he said there was a chassid whose father-in-law was a misnagid, and the chassid had a baby, a little baby boy, and he wanted that the Rebbe should be sandik. So he arranged with the Rebbe that he was going to, the Rebbe was in a neighboring town, that he was going to come the night before the bris. He was going to come to the Rebbe, and then early in the morning they would travel together. He would bring him to the bris. So the father of the baby, the chassid, left to get the Rebbe. Meanwhile, the misnagid, his father-in-law, waited until it was as soon as it was nates. He took the baby and he had the local male do the bris, so that this Hasidic Rebbe would not be the sandik by his grandson's bris. When the chassid arrived at the Rebbe and discovered that the bris was done already, he was crestfallen. So he went into the Rebbe to let him know that that the whole thing was over. So when he told the Rebbe, he was radiating joy. So he said to him, Rebbe, simcha zu ma'isa, what's this simcha all about? So he said, you know what? He said, whenever I do a mitzvah, he said, so I try to do the mitzvah, I prepare for the mitzvah, and then I try to do it with all the right kavanas. He said, but then after I do it, and I look back at what I did, I realize I didn't do it as, with the whole shleimus, like it should have been done, he said. So, as much as I rejoice for the privilege of having done the mitzvah, I'm critical of myself that I didn't do it well enough. He said, over here he says, when a person wants to do a mitzvah, as a machshavah, wants to do the mitzvah, v'nenas, and something happens, and he can't do it. Malo lavakosov, so that it's like the Torah comes along and says, I consider it just like it was done. So he says, so over here, I wanted to be part of this mitzvah. He said, and it didn't work out, so what happened? So he says, so now the Torah comes along and says, it's just as though you would have done it. But when the Torah does a mitzvah, it does it perfectly. So he says, so now I had the benefit of the eir of the mitzvah, and I don't have to sit in judgment on myself that it wasn't good enough because when the Torah does it. So the Sat Marov said to my father-in-law, he says, you want to sit in the sukkah? He says, so, but you can't. He said, you have so much English left, you can sit in the sukkah. So it's ma'avam avakosov. So the mitzvah that you're having now, sitting in the sukkah, is much greater than if you'd actually be sitting in the sukkah. My father said that it gave him a great nechama. It really comforted him.
So we said that's for kol oinus?
Huh?
That's for kol oinus?
Probably.
So the next year on Sukkot, did he go back to the hospital?
Huh? Anyway, one of the question that Rabbi Yitzchak asked yesterday, or the day before yesterday, about the names of Keya and Havaya. So the bottom line is, I really don't have a clue. But it generated in me just this tension that we all have between living in the present and dealing with our vision of the future. So I've referred to this many times in the past, that the Medrash is a Yalkut Shimaini someplace, I don't remember, I think in Bar Midbar somewhere, that says on the pasuk of Oz Yavdel Moshe Sholesh Arim, that Moshe Rabbeinu designated the 3 refuge cities in Ever HaYarden, because he never got to Israel. He designated them. So the Medrash says, Kol Prakamatya Shal Moshe Ba'oz. And so all of Moshe's business was with the concept of Oz. Oz Yasha Moshe, Oz Yavdil Moshe, May Oz Basi Al Parei. That's kind of saying as though that were Moshe's essence, was Oz. So I know we've talked about this, which is that if we look at what Moshe Rabbeinu could have or should have done after crossing the sea, was looking back at the past and thinking about all the people that were left behind. Did I do enough to save them? There's all of the recriminations. Did I do enough to spare the suffering of Klal Yisrael when they were in Egypt? And when he got out of the sea, he could have been thinking about, okay, now great, so now we're saved, and we don't have to worry about Egypt anymore. But I have over here several million people, and I'm in the desert. There is no grocery store here for me to be able to feed several million people. I don't have enough water to give them. We're going to be exposed to the elements over here. I don't have a canopy big enough to protect them against the sun. What are we going to do tomorrow morning? So I think if it were any one of us, it would probably be very hard for us to sing a Shiur. As much as we're saved from the Egyptians, but I have all the sadness of having lost so many people in Egypt, and guilt of maybe not having done enough, and I have all of the anxieties about what am I going to do tomorrow. So, but Moshe did none of those things. Moshe sang a song. Moshe was in the moment. And this is a moment of triumph. It's a moment in which the Rabbi Shalom has shown himself and has affirmed our value. So Moshe Rabbeinu sang. He was in the moment. When there came an opportunity for him to fulfill the mitzvah of designating the refuge cities, he didn't say to himself, well, these refuge cities have no value until they designate the refuge cities on the other side. These now are a legal fiction. We've given them a name, but they won't work and I'm not going there. So what's the point? Right now I have an opportunity. When Klal Yisrael found themselves under Paro's thumb in a with increased fury and an impossible workload. So Moshe Rabbeinu came to Hashem and said, "Miyaz basi el pari." This is unbearable. That Moshe was in the moment. So the Torah is trying to, the Chazal is trying to tell us that was Moshe's greatness. He was able to be in the moment. And I've said many times that I realize how much of me is in the moment. I come to play with my little grandchildren. How much of me is in the room with them? Part of me is thinking about what I said or what I did. Was it good? Was it not good? Should I have been there? Should I not been there? It's all kinds of stuff. Just sitting in judgment about the quality of the things that I have done, and then part of me is worrying about what's coming down the pike, and what I need to do, and how am I going to be up to doing what has to get done. So maybe 30% of me is actually in the room with my grandchildren, because there's so many parts of me that are elsewhere. And Moshe's greatness is that he was 100% there. When he was davening, he was 100% in the davening. And when he was learning, he was 100% in the learning. And when he was with people, he was 100% with people. It's, I think one of the things about the therapists, psychotherapists, who are really good is that they're in the room with the person. 100% of them is in the room with the person. They're fully, completely focused on the person. You see, Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, when he would bring with his Hasidim, like they had a yechidus with him, so he wore a special robe. After a couple hours of visiting with his Hasidim, he would remove the robe, and his gabbai would take it and have to wash it out and hang it out to dry because it was soaked with sweat. So on one occasion he complained. So he said, "But what is the Rebbe doing there?" It's such sweating so much. You're not digging ditches. You're not physically working. So the Rebbe said to him, he said, "Let me tell you how I have to be able to respond to a chassid who comes to me with his woes." He says, so the chassid comes and tells me all of his pain. He said, so as long as I don't really experience his pain, I can't help him. So I have to get undressed from myself and get dressed in the chassid. And I have to feel it the way he feels it. He says, when I feel it the way he feels it, I am now subjective, like he is, and how I can't help him. So in order to help him, I have to get undressed from myself and get dressed in myself again. So now, having felt his pain as he feels it, now I can be objective to it, and now I can address it. So he said, if you had to get dressed and undressed as many times in these few hours as I do, he said, you'd also sweat bullets.
Rabbi, you talked about, it's interesting you mentioned the story of the Satmar Rebbe, because he was regretting how he did mitzvahs. Not regret, he didn't do it the way he should have done it. And that was, but so he, in a sense, looked, and there is a part of us that has to do that. That has to look back and say, what could we have done better? What could we do better? And there's a part of us that looks in the future too. I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu, I don't know if that was bad or good, but he did look in the future. He said, Klal Yisrael lo yaminu bi. He very much looked into the future. So what's the balance of these two things? Because I mean, and then there's, you know, there's a mentality, let's just live in the present and just make, and that's also can be very negative because I don't care about any repercussions and just, I think we all struggle with that. Like, what's the
Right,
balance?
so that's true. So I think that's the difference in our experience between the Shem Havaya and the Shem Keya. I think that when we're doing something, when we're davening, when we're talking to our spouse, when we're talking to our children, whatever it is that requires our attention at the moment, that in a certain sense that's the Shem Havaya. That's where we need to be in the moment. And recognize that thinking about the past or worrying about the future deny us the full quality of the moment that we're in. When we're not engaged in something which really requires that kind of immersion, then I think that the timelessness of Keya becomes very important for us. And I think we need to know whether we're engaged in some kind of a dynamic process where we are becoming, and becoming is dependent on our past experience, and becoming is dependent upon our are we thinking about what works for us in the future? So, being human is not a simple business, but I think it does bring us into that tension between the past, present, and future, and the necessity for us to manage that, so that when we're doing something which is important, that we're fully in that moment, in that experience. And I think that I remember once when we started our Moistus in Milwaukee. It was in 1989, so we didn't have the money to do so, and everybody in town was so upset with us that they shut down on us, so I had to travel to raise money. I came into a Gvir, and I started to tell him about our plight, and he started opening the mail. While he was listening to me, he was opening the mail. And I recognized that, and I was offended. Because that meant to me he was not focused. I mean, he wasn't really listening. He was kind of listening with a half an ear. And then I also recognized how many times, I still find myself doing this, but I'm at least aware of it, is that when I'm reciting a bracha, then I'm doing something else at the same time. So I'm reciting the bracha Asher Yotzar, and I'm moving stuff around on the table, and whatever it is, I'm doing something else, which I'm kind of paying attention to 1,000 different things. And I catch myself, and I say to myself, really, I should be paying full attention to the Rabbi Michel, and I'm opening up the mail, or the equivalent of opening up the mail. So we're not. we're distracted people, and we're not fully engaged in anything. You know, there are times when I'm looking into a sefer and the Rebbetzin says something to me, and I'm listening really, but she said to me, "You're not listening to me." You know, so, and we do this. You know, we're reading the newspaper, and our kids say something to us, and you know, So I think there's right, and so in addition to the fact that only part of us is present, our kids recognize that only part of us is present. And when we're talking to people, people can see when we're really there and when we're not completely there, when we're distracted. So I think when it comes to our relationships and when it comes to our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that there's this tension between the Kaya and the Havaya. So I really didn't answer Rabbi Yitzchak's question, but I think to the extent that Hashem's names are active in our own experience, I think that's one of our problems. Moshe went to Bnei Yisrael and conveyed the message that Hashem told him, these four Lashonos of Geula, Veitzesi, Veitzalti, Lakachti, wait a second, Veitzesi, Veitzalti, Vigoalti, and Lakachti, those four Lashonos, so he told him, and it says, V'lisham al Moshe, V'ketzer ruach, V'yaved HaKosher. They couldn't, or they didn't listen to Moshe because they were short of breath and because of the hard work. So, from a standpoint, kind of a simple standpoint, they were working very hard. They were short of breath. They just didn't have the energy to listen to him. But I think that another way of understanding this pasuk is that Moshe Rabbeinu was not a very popular redeemer. A popular redeemer comes along and says, I'm going to free you from slavery and you're going to be able to do whatever you want and things are going to be, all the indulgences that you were denied because of your poverty and because of your hard work, it will be available to you. You promise things that people really want to hear. Moshe Rabbeinu came along and said, I'm going to take you out of Mitzrayim, and you're not going to be in slavery to the Shloah Kodesh says actually that the reason that Klal Yisrael needed to be in bondage and with Avodas Perach in Mitzrayim was their preparation to become Avdei Hashem. Because in order to be an Avdei Hashem, it requires Avodas Perach. It's hard work, and it's selfless, and it requires stick-to-itiveness and diligence and discipline, all the things that are so. And the issue of immediate gratification is one of the things that would be probably one of the first things that people would want to do. What's again? I'm blocking it on the Holocaust author who just died. Who? Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel relates that when they were freed from whichever death camp he was in, when they were liberated, that there was amongst the people who were prisoners in the camp were non-Jews. He said the minute that they were freed, the non-Jews were so filled with hatred for what had been done to them that they grabbed guns and went after to try to find their former captors. He said the first thing that the Jews did was to make a minyan. They organized the minyan. So the moment that you're freed, whatever it is that you sometime becomes your first agenda. So, Moshe Rabbeinu was a very unpopular goyel. He came along and he said to them, "Look, guys, I'm going to free you from here, but I'm not going to free you from hard work. That you're going to work just as hard for the Rabbi Shalom as you did for Pari. And what's more, the reward for working for the Rabbi Shalom is in a distance in time. It's not immediate gratification. It's something that happens sometimes only after a lifetime." So he said, the Klai Yisrael couldn't listen to it. Why? Because they were keitzadlach. They were impatient. What do you mean? I have to wait? I have to wait for the reward? And what's more, mi'aveda kasha. What are you telling? You're talking to us about hard work. We don't want to work hard like that. So he said, Moshe. The reason they didn't listen to Moshe was because his message was postponed gratification and hard work. And they had no tolerance for those two messages. So, and then Hashem says to us, so go talk to Pari. And he said, look, Bnei Yisrael didn't listen to me, so how's it going to be their Pari? So one of the Hasidic Sfarim says that Moshe Rabbeinu was not saying, what he was saying was like this. He was saying, hey, Bnei Yisrael Yishomer Lai. Bnei Yisrael didn't listen to me. So he says, Ve'ech, how will it look if Yishma'eni Pari, if Pari will listen to me? He says, so you're going to say, Bnei Yisrael wouldn't listen, but Pari listened, so what's happening about this? He says, and then, what will I be able to say? It's a beautiful shot.
Why did he need to tell them what he was going to do? He needed them to buy in. They just done it.
It's a surprise.
I'm saying, go straight to Paro, say, cut it out.
What?
Take the restrictions of work, whatever it is. All of a sudden, they feel like. I mean, there's a reason you had to tell them Mirosh. Even though they didn't do.
You're suggesting that Moshe could have told them later. He didn't have to, when he didn't tell them, right away.
A better place to listen. It seems from the pasuk that he needed to tell them whether they were going to buy it or not. He needed to announce what the plan was.
Good question.
From a practical perspective,
What?
he's going to Paro and he's saying he's representing them. I mean, if he goes to Paro and no one's buying into what he's saying, so what's the argument with Paro about? I mean, sort of
we said before about Moshe Rabbeinu was concerned about the people left behind. If he didn't do that, that would exacerbate that whole issue.
Then he would, because then he would say to himself, I should have told them. I mean,
And he definitely wanted to take out the Erev Rav.
what?
Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to take the Erev Rav.
I don't know if he wanted to. I think he acceded to it. They were, they hopped on the bandwagon, and Moshe Rabbeinu for whatever his cheshbon was, but he felt that was, he shouldn't deny them that.
Also, when Yaakov was informed that Yosef was alive, as I braced in the Neshama, he couldn't swallow it. And people during the war, they couldn't fathom leaving their situation, how dangerous it was. There's a certain inertia, resistance to being credit the message. There has to be lot several times. Can't hit it all at once.
I don't know, maybe, just perhaps, that's when we have this, Miller says that he identified himself as the real Goyal by saying these secret words, Pakoid Pakadati, those two words. That Yankov and Yosef, before they died, gave over this message that you'll know who the real Goyal is because he will say these words, Pakoid Pakadati Eschem Esa'osu Lechem Mitzrayim. At the end of Parshas Vayechi, that's how it ends up. He uses that double thing in Vayash when he's called Pocket Yifkod again, Pocket Yifkod, and the man says that once Yaakov said that, and then the second time was Yosef said it, and that was the code. You'll know who the real Goyal is because you say these words. So some of the Meforshim would say that code was transmitted secretly, so that only kind of the Zikanim were aware of the code, so that they would, but the Hamayinam didn't know it, and that's what when Moshe came along and said to Bnei Yisrael, Lech v'asafta ziknei Yisrael, go and gather the elders and tell them, Hashem lekev v'sechem niro elai, the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, leimer, poked pakadati eschem, es'asu lechem b'Mitzrayim. So he said the magic words. Rashi over here quotes this. Kivan shetem lehem lashon zeh. Once you tell them this, miyad yishmu l'kelechem. They will immediately listen to you. Shekvar siman zeh mosu biyodam miyankiv u'miyosef, because they have this siman from Yankiv and Yosef, shevloshen zehim nigalim, that this is the language with which they will be redeemed. So, the question is anybody could come along and say those words. So how do you know? So one of the things that I thought might be what's going on over here is that pakod pakadati, a mitzvah is a pakida. Mitzvah is sometimes called a pakida, a commandment, an instruction, and that one of the things that Pakod V'Kadim, it was not so much the words, so much as Pakod V'Kadati represents these two concepts, which are unpopular. Namely, I'm coming to redeem you, but I'm coming to redeem you with the knowledge that I'm not offering you a free ride. It's going to be hard work, and you're going to have to learn to wait for the results. That's the pakod, and that's the pakadati, and nobody who wants to be a popular redeemer is going to say that. So when somebody comes along and says, I'm going to get you out of here, but it's going to be hard work, and you're going to have to wait, so in a certain sense, that was what legitimatized him, was the fact that he came along and said those things. Had he not said those things, then he could have been just another charismatic politician.
Takes tremendous willpower of the scanning. If they knew that code, for one of them watching the suffering of everybody, not to rise up and say he knows, reveal that and try and take them out. I mean, despite the suffering, to wait for someone from the outside to come and reveal that. It's a tremendous emes.
You don't find Mefurish much lamenting about the people who didn't make it out of Mitzrayim. You're not even mentioned Mefurish. How do I understand that?
Look, the only reason that anything is recorded in the Torah is if it's going to teach us something. I have to assume that the fact that Klal Yisrael is somehow vulnerable to assimilation is something that you only want to refer to obliquely. You don't want to make that a part of history. I mean, you don't want to make it part of Torah. You don't want to make assimilation part of Torah. I mean, it's bad enough. Then Rabbi Michel tells Moshe, "V'kom ha'omazeh v'zona achirim achirim."
These people made a declaration that I want to go out, or Kodesh Baruch Hu knew how to be mavchin, because the Torah was before the Korban Pesach.
They just. I don't think this wasn't a formal selection. I mean, people just, they didn't want to go out.
But if Mitzrayim is the paradigm for Geula, does that mean that in the ultimate Geula, only 1/5 of Klal Yisrael are also going to be redeemed?
We've spoken about this before. Mashiach came to Klal Yisrael right now. How many people would leave their respective countries for, give everything up and come.
It's more than 500.
Huh?
Taking the Morocco.
I don't know, right now, so far, the people who are Shemrei Torah are probably, and I don't know if do they make up 10% of, do we have 1,500,000 from you? Maybe today we do. But there's 15 million Jews in the world, so 10% would be 1,500,000. Right, so do we have, my question is, do we have today 10% of Klal Yisrael that's not assimilated?
Sure, I mean, sure, no, for sure. I mean, in Eretz Yisrael, it seems that the Shomer Torah mitzvah is 30%, 40%. That's without Masorti. So that's about 7 million. So the number is far high. The question
We're here already, so that doesn't count.
doesn't. We don't have to make a choice.
Yeah, that's in-
You were the one who told me about this interview with Chiloni. Why don't you tell them that?
If I remember it exactly, I don't remember his name, but he was somebody from the far left, very far left liberal feeling thing, to the point where he basically holds there's no difference between you and anybody else.
Here in Israel.
Yeah. But he said, and he was honest about it, that he didn't want his children to move to Chutzlar. He wants them to live in Israel. So he said, he asked Nakasha on himself, he says, it's a stira, there's no difference between Japan and Yerushalayim. Well, I don't want my kids. So he said, the only way that my kids can remain Jewish and have a shaykhus with Yiddishkeit is if they're in Eretz Yisrael. Because if they go to America, the only way they can stay Jewish is by being from. In Eretz Yisrael, you can be a Yid without that.
That's a common secular Zionist position.
Yeah, but the interesting was that he didn't want them to go to Chutzlar because they would have to be from in order to stay Jewish.
And that's already not worth it. In other words, to be a Yid is more important than to have a Rebbe show.
Why?
Because they're,
Pintalayid,
if you're a Yid, you need to do our
the Pintalayid, what?
Well, you asked why, because that's a Ruach, what a Kasha.
Yeah.
You can just live in Israel and you get that. That's the word.
Easy ride.
Other
And
people,
Apple
other
Pie.
people being from Korea because they have the Jewish culture with that.
And Apple the fact that somehow the connection to Yiddishkeit still doesn't allow him to give it away. Whatever that very outer shell of Yiddishkeit that he wants to be connected to, but he's still, that's the Bental Yid.
We have that Havchana in Mitzrayim. Vayidei Malachus, Vayidei Shaliach, Halal Adi Avarazar, Halal Adi Avarazar. So superficially, so Kadosh Baruch Hu by him because he can be mafkin, even the Malachim can't be. So it's that particular Yid that is this loose. It means even those are ones who are there, but